There was this moment when I just sat down and stared at the wall, not out of boredom. It was more like a quiet collapse. Everything around me was functioning: work, conversations, daily life. But something inside felt hollow, like I was walking around on autopilot. And for the first time, I realized I'd spent most of my life looking outside myself for answers I could only find within. It's strange how often we're told to look elsewhere. Advice columns, gurus, books, partners. We chase solutions like they're hidden treasures just beyond the next corner. I used to think that if I could just fix everything around me, then maybe the storm inside would calm. But it never did. No matter how many to-do lists I checked off, how many people I tried to please, or how much I performed the role of someone doing okay, something still felt deeply off. There's this whole universe inside each of us. Not in some poetic way, but literally. Thoughts, dreams, fears, wounds, unspoken needs. It's massive, and yet we spend so little time there. We operate on the surface, reacting, adapting, surviving, while the deeper parts of us go ignored. I don't think we do it on purpose. We're just not taught how to be with ourselves. We're taught to achieve, to move on, to be strong, but not how to listen. Looking back, I think I spent years outsourcing my worth. I needed others to tell me who I was, that I was enough, that I was doing life right. I thought healing would come from outside, that someone would come along and say the magic words that would finally make me feel whole. But no one ever did, because no one could. And I carried around this quiet resentment, this ache that I didn't understand at the time. It felt like everyone else had the map to life except me. But here's the truth I stumbled into slowly and painfully. No one has the map. We all just carry fragments, and the only full picture is the one you build from within. I didn't want to hear that at first. It sounded lonely, even a little cruel. I wanted rescue. I wanted someone to pull me out of the mess. But eventually I saw that the only way out was in. That realization didn't come from reading a book or having a breakthrough therapy session. It came in silence. It came in that moment I mentioned earlier, sitting with the wall, overwhelmed and tired of trying to be okay. I remember feeling this quiet voice rise up inside me, like a whisper from somewhere deep. You're not broken, you're just disconnected. And it hit me so hard I cried. Disconnected, that was the word. I'd been so busy trying to be what the world needed, I never asked what I needed. I was present for everyone else's emotions, but numb to my own. I thought love was self-abandonment, always being there no matter the cost. I thought strength meant not feeling. I thought value came from performance. But none of that was true. None of it. And what's wild is the moment I started turning inward, really paying attention, I began to notice things I'd ignored for years. Little instincts, flashes of memory, longings I'd buried under busyness and roles. There was this aching beauty in finally letting myself be, without judgment, without rushing to fix anything, just noticing. And in that space, something shifted. Not everything became perfect, but something in me softened, like I stopped fighting myself. I know now that the answers don't live in someone else's eyes, or in achievements, or in being needed. They live in the quiet moments when you let yourself feel, when you get curious about what hurts, and when you stop pretending you're fine if you're not. It's still not easy. I slip back all the time, but I catch it quicker now. I don't shame myself for it. I just return, like coming home. And every time I do, it gets a little easier to remember that the wholeness I've been seeking was never missing. It was just waiting. Sometimes the most profound healing begins when you stop running, sit with the silence, and simply ask yourself, what if I already have what I need? And then you listen. It's wild how early it starts. This whole thing of performing, pleasing, pretending. When we're kids, it's innocent at first. You do something your parents like and you get a smile, a pat on the head. You misbehave or cry too loudly, and suddenly there's tension in the air. You learn, without anyone having to say it, that certain parts of you are good and others are not welcome. That lesson sticks. It burrows deep. I remember being praised for being quiet, for being polite, for not making a fuss, and so I became someone who smiled even when I was uncomfortable. I learned to read the room like my life depended on it. I could sense moods, anticipate needs, soften my voice, shrink my desires, all so I could fit in and be what others expected. It felt like survival, and in some ways, I guess it was. But here's the painful part. You do that long enough, and you start forgetting who you were before the mask. I don't blame anyone for this. Most people are just passing on what they were taught. Our culture rewards the obedient, the successful, the agreeable. We're taught to play roles: the good child, the ideal partner, the reliable employee. The world tells you who you should be, and if you play the part well, you get validation. But it's not love. Not really. It's approval, and those aren't the same thing. The problem is playing roles comes at a cost. You start suppressing parts of yourself, your anger, your sadness, your needs, your dreams, anything that might make someone uncomfortable. You learn to feel guilty for wanting too much. You tell yourself to be grateful, to not rock the boat. And eventually, without realizing it, you become a stranger to yourself. I used to think that shrinking myself was noble, that being low maintenance made me easier to love, that disappearing a little was a kindness. But it wasn't. It was self-abandonment in disguise. And the worst part, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I thought I was just being good. But being good doesn't mean being invisible. Being loving doesn't mean losing yourself. You can only live like that for so long before something inside you starts to ache. It's subtle at first. A quiet resentment. A sense of emptiness you can't quite name. You start questioning why you feel exhausted all the time. Why things that used to bring joy now feel flat. You wonder why you're surrounded by people and still feel alone. And if you're lucky, or maybe just broken enough, you finally ask the hard question, what part of me did I bury to make everyone else comfortable? That question cracked something open in me. I began to realize how many decisions I'd made out of fear. Fear of being too much. Fear of being rejected. Fear of disappointing someone. I traced it all the way back to moments when I was shamed for being emotional or silenced for speaking up. Little cuts that taught me it was safer to hide. But hiding has a price. You don't just lose your pain. You lose your aliveness, your spark, your authenticity. And here's the kicker. People fall in love with the version of you that isn't even real. They love the mask. They admire your composure, your kindness, your strength, all the while having no idea how much you're holding back. It's lonely, it's exhausting, and it's unsustainable. Eventually, something inside you breaks. Not in a destructive way, but in a liberating one. You just get tired of the performance. You want to scream, to cry, to laugh too loud, to rest without guilt, to say what you really think. You want to be real. And it's terrifying, because you know some people won't like the real you, but you also know that continuing to play pretend is killing you slowly. So you start one step at a time. You speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. You ask for what you need, even if it feels selfish. You let yourself feel, really feel, without apologizing. You say no when something doesn't feel right, even if it disappoints someone, and you begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That's when healing begins. Not when everything is calm and sorted out, but when you choose yourself. Not the version shaped by approval, but the version that's raw, honest, and whole. It's not about rejecting others, it's about including yourself in the equation. Finally, we think we need to earn the right to be ourselves, but we don't. You don't need permission to be who you are. You just need the courage to stop asking for it. I remember the moment it finally hit me. This quiet but brutal truth. You can't give what you don't have. It sounds simple, maybe even cliché, but it cracked something open in me. I was always the person others came to, the one who listened, held space, encouraged, supported. I wore it like a badge of honor. It made me feel useful, important, loved, maybe. But deep down, I was running on empty. I kept trying to pour from a cup that had been dry for years, and no one knew. I was so good at hiding it, smiling while quietly unraveling, showing up while quietly falling apart. I didn't realize how much of my identity was built around being needed, how much I feared that if I stopped giving, people would stop loving me. So I kept giving, even when it hurt, even when I was exhausted, even when I felt like I was disappearing. But love born from self-abandonment isn't love. It's a transaction, one you can never win. Somewhere along the line, I'd learned that self-sacrifice was noble, that it was my job to hold everyone else together, even if it meant crumbling in silence. I thought that being strong meant never needing help, that loving others meant putting their needs above mine. And for a while, it worked, or at least it seemed to. People appreciated me. They called me selfless. But inside, I was screaming for someone to notice that I was drowning too. And that's when I realized I wasn't being loving. I was being afraid. Afraid that if I stopped, no one would stay. That if I had needs, people would run. That if I said, I'm not okay, they'd be disappointed or uncomfortable. So I kept performing. I gave love hoping it would come back to me, but never dared to ask for it directly. I thought being needless made me lovable, but it only made me invisible. Then one night, I remember staring at the ceiling, feeling completely drained. My mind was racing with everyone else's problems, everyone else's expectations. And this thought floated up. Who takes care of you? Not in a bitter way, just a quiet question. I had no answer. That silence was deafening. It was in that silence that I finally saw it. The harsh, beautiful truth. I had been waiting for someone to give me what I was unwilling to give myself. Compassion, rest, gentleness, permission to just be. I expected others to fill me up, when I didn't even know how to sit with myself in kindness. I was trying to offer peace while carrying chaos, trying to love others while hating parts of myself. It was unsustainable, it was unfair to them and to me, so I made a promise to myself. Not a dramatic vow, just a quiet, steady decision. I will not abandon myself again. And at first, it felt selfish. It felt wrong to put myself first, to cancel plans when I needed rest, to say no without a long explanation, to ask for what I wanted, to prioritize joy. But I kept reminding myself, it's not selfish to fill your own cup. It's necessary, it's sane, it's human. We live in a world that praises burnout, that glorifies being always there for everyone. But what we rarely talk about is the deep, soul-level burnout of constantly betraying yourself for the sake of being liked. We wear our exhaustion like medals of honor, but no one gives you a medal for emotional bankruptcy. No one notices until you fall apart. I had to relearn what love actually means. And here's what I found. Real love includes you. It honors your limits. It respects your needs. It doesn't require you to disappear in order to be accepted. And most of all, it starts with you. Not because self-love is trendy, but because it's foundational. You can't offer wholeness from a fractured place. You can't guide others to light while refusing to face your own darkness. And once I started practicing that, imperfectly of course, everything began to shift. My relationships changed. My energy changed. My ability to actually be present, not just perform presence, deepened. And slowly I began to see that the love I had tried so hard to earn, I was already worthy of. I always had been. So now, when I feel myself slipping back into old habits, over-giving, over-functioning, overcompensating, I pause. I breathe, and I ask, what do I need right now? Sometimes it's rest. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's permission to not be strong. Whatever it is, I try to give it to myself first, not because I don't care about others, but because I finally care enough to stop abandoning me. I used to think the dark parts of me were flaws, things to fix, to hide, to be ashamed of. You know what I mean? The jealousy, the anger, the fear, the bitterness. I told myself they didn't belong in the version of me that was lovable, admirable, worthy, so I buried them deep. And for a long time, I was convinced I'd done the right thing. But those buried parts never disappeared. They just waited. What no one told me, and what I had to learn the hard way, is that the pieces of ourselves we suppress don't stay quiet forever. They leak out, sometimes in sarcasm, sometimes in resentment, sometimes in the quiet way you start disconnecting from your life. I didn't explode. I eroded, slowly, secretly. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of us we reject or disown because we're afraid they'll make us unlovable. And it's not just the bad stuff we throw down there. It's also our brilliance, our fire, our creativity, our power, anything that ever made someone uncomfortable or that didn't fit the version of ourselves we thought the world wanted. We lock it away. And then we wonder why we feel empty. I remember one night scrolling on my phone in the dark, feeling this weird mix of rage and sadness. I was angry at someone close to me, not because they did anything terrible, but because they crossed a boundary I never actually communicated. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I just stayed silent like always. And later, I judged myself for being passive, for feeling too much, for not speaking up. The whole loop. And that's when it hit me. The anger wasn't the problem. The silence was. I had demonized my anger for so long that I forgot it had something to say. It was trying to protect me. It was trying to wake me up to something I wasn't honoring. And that's true for most of our unacceptable emotions. They're messengers, not enemies. But we've been taught to treat them like threats, to numb them, deny them, spiritualize them away. So I started getting curious. I began writing letters to the parts of me I used to hate, to the jealous me, the tired me, the insecure me, the angry, petty, awkward, grieving me. I didn't try to fix them, I just let them speak, and I listened. It was awkward at first, emotional, but something strange happened. I felt more whole, like these voices weren't monsters, they were just me, parts of me I'd left behind. And you know what's even stranger? The more I accepted them, the less power they had over me. See, what you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It waits in the dark. And the longer you avoid it, the more it grows in secret, twisting into shame, sabotage, self-hatred. But when you turn and face it, when you say, I see you, I get it, you're part of me too, something shifts. The shadow becomes integrated. You stop living in fragments. It's not easy, though. Looking at your shadow is messy. It brings up old wounds, uncomfortable truths, painful memories. But it's also where you find your power, your voice, your boundaries, your authenticity. You can't be whole if you're still at war with parts of yourself. And that was the breakthrough for me, realizing that healing wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who I was before I started editing myself for survival, before I learned that certain parts were bad and needed to be erased, before I traded my truth for acceptance. Now, when I feel something uncomfortable rise up, envy, sadness, rage, fear, I don't shame it. I meet it. I ask, what are you here to show me? Not always gracefully, not always quickly, but I try. And every time I do, I reclaim another piece of myself. That's what shadow work really is. Not a trendy idea, but a radical act of self-inclusion. It's saying, nothing in me is beyond love. And that doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or bypassing growth. It means understanding that everything we are, even the messy, painful, complicated parts, belongs. I'm still learning, still unlearning, still finding pieces of myself in dark corners and bringing them into the light. But every time I do, I feel more real, more grounded, more alive. Because when you stop running from your shadow, you finally start coming home. I never realized how loud the world was until I tried to sit in silence, not just the literal noise, though that's everywhere too, but the internal static that never seems to shut off. Notifications, expectations, comparisons, opinions. It's like we're constantly being pulled away from ourselves, nudged toward becoming someone else. And the scariest part? We get so used to it that we don't even notice how far we've drifted. When I first tried to slow down, to really slow down, I didn't find peace. I found anxiety, restlessness, this weird pressure to get back to doing. Sitting with myself felt like stepping into a void, and that void terrified me. Because in that space there were no distractions, no roles to perform, no one to impress, just me. And I didn't know who that was anymore. I think a lot of us fear silence because it exposes what we've been avoiding, the grief we never processed, the questions we never answered, the needs we silenced. We fill every moment to avoid having to meet ourselves. Scrolling, planning, fixing, chasing. We call it productivity. But sometimes it's just a sophisticated way of running. That's what I was doing, running. From the stillness, from the truth, from the parts of me that weren't shiny or impressive. I told myself I was just busy, but deep down I was scared that if I stopped, the emptiness would swallow me. But here's the thing I've come to believe, that emptiness isn't a threat. It's sacred. It's not a sign that something's missing. It's a clearing, a space where something real can finally emerge. But it's not immediate. You don't sit in silence for 5 minutes and suddenly feel enlightened. At first, it's uncomfortable, agitating, even painful. But if you stay, really stay, something begins to soften. For me, it started with small things. Turning off the background noise, putting down the phone, taking walks without music, sitting on the floor of my room and just breathing. No goal, no outcome, just presence. And it was there, in that quiet space, that I began to hear the voice beneath all the noise. Not a literal voice, more like a feeling, a remembering. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was gentle, patient, familiar. And slowly, I started to feel things I hadn't felt in a long time. Not dramatic emotions, just subtle truths, like the realization that I was allowed to slow down, that I didn't need to earn rest, that my worth wasn't tied to output, that I was still me, even when I wasn't achieving anything, that I had been measuring my life with the wrong ruler. But more than anything, I felt this quiet grief. For all the moments I abandoned myself to keep up with a world that never stopped spinning. For all the ways I ignored my soul in the name of being enough. For all the times I confused busyness with purpose. And that grief surprisingly became a doorway, because once you let yourself feel it, really feel it, you stop needing to run. You stop needing to fill every gap. You stop fearing the quiet. And in that space, something softer, something truer, can finally show up. Not the version of you that hustles and proves and pleases, but the version that simply is, raw, open, real. It's funny. We spend so much energy trying to be seen by others, but there's something deeply healing about being seen by yourself. Not judged, not evaluated, just witnessed, just met. Now, when life gets loud, and it always does, I try to come back to that place, not as a perfect ritual, but as a returning, a remembering. I carve out moments to be with myself, not to escape life, but to reconnect with what's underneath it all. Because the world will never stop demanding, but I can choose to stop listening to every demand. And when I do, when I really drop into that silence, I don't find nothingness, I find me. Not the curated version, not the expected version, just the real one, the one that breathes, the one that's learning, the one that's enough, even in stillness. And that is where I begin again. No one tells you that becoming yourself is going to hurt. They sell you the idea of self-discovery like it's a feel-good, Instagram-worthy journey. But the truth, it's raw, it's disorienting, and sometimes it's downright brutal. Because before you find who you really are, you have to face who you thought you were and let it fall apart. For a while, I resisted that part. I wanted the healing without the discomfort, the growth without the grief. I wanted to keep the mask on and still feel free. But that's not how it works. Becoming whole isn't about adding more to yourself, more knowledge, more affirmations, more positivity. It's about peeling back, layer by layer, until what's left is true. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be. Beneath the conditioning, the roles, the trauma, it's not a linear path. It's not even a straight line. It's more like a spiral. You keep coming back to the same places, the same wounds, but each time with more awareness, more capacity, more compassion. And God, it's humbling. You think you've healed something, and then a situation pops up that presses on the same old bruise. You thought you were past it, past the fear, past the shame, past the people-pleasing, but there it is again, the urge to shrink, the impulse to explain yourself, the reflex to abandon your truth for peace. And for a second, you feel like you've failed. But you haven't. You're just deeper now. That's what I remind myself. This isn't regression. This is returning, with new eyes, with a little more courage, a little more softness, and slowly you begin to notice. The old patterns are still there, but you don't act on them as quickly. You pause, you breathe, you choose differently, not always, but enough. And that's the work, not perfection. Presence, not constant victory, a conscious effort. For me, individuation has meant letting go of so many identities I once clung to. The reliable one, the strong one, the one who always has it together. And grieving those identities felt like death. I didn't know who I was without them, but the space they left behind, it made room for something real. I started asking new questions, not, how can I fix myself, but, what part of me have I been ignoring? Not, why am I like this, but, what did I need back then that I never got? And those questions didn't offer neat answers, but they offered something better, depth, connection, self-trust. There were days I felt like I was falling apart, like everything I thought I knew about myself was being stripped away, and in a way, it was. But what I discovered underneath, the softness, the stillness, the strength that doesn't come from control, that was the gold. That was me. I think the hardest part of all this is how lonely it can feel. Not because you're physically alone, but because you're not playing the old games anymore. You're not pretending, you're not performing, and some people won't know how to meet you there. They liked the version of you that didn't make waves, the version that played small, the version that made them comfortable. But you can't stay there. You can't keep abandoning yourself to be digestible. Not if you want to live fully, not if you want to breathe. And so you choose, again and again. You choose to be honest, even when it's awkward. You choose to hold space for your own pain, even when no one else sees it. You choose to speak your needs, even when your voice shakes. You choose the path of becoming, not because it's easy, but because the cost of staying asleep is too high. Some days, you'll feel strong and clear and grounded. Other days, you'll feel messy and doubtful and small. Both are part of it. Both are okay, because the goal isn't to become someone else. It's to become you. And maybe that's the most radical thing you can do in a world that's constantly trying to shape you into something else. To return to yourself. Again and again. With gentleness. With truth. With love. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to fix yourself. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally understood. You were never broken to begin with, just fragmented, just misled, just human. And once that lands, something inside you softens in a way that no affirmation or achievement ever could. I used to chase this idea of being healed. Like one day I'd wake up and all the pain would be gone, all the questions answered, all the old wounds closed up for good. I thought healing meant erasing the hard parts of me, the sadness, the fear, the anger, but now I see it differently. Healing is not about removing what hurts. It's about integrating it, owning it, letting it breathe. There's a quiet strength in no longer needing to hide, because the truth is, our wounds have shaped us, not just in the ways we struggle, but in the ways we love, in the depth of our empathy, in our ability to sit with someone else's pain without flinching. The things that cracked us open, they also made us deeper, more real, more alive. And that's what I've come to cherish most about this journey. Not the moments when everything felt perfect, but the moments when I was able to stand in my imperfection and still choose love, still choose to show up, still choose to be seen. That, to me, is freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from having no responsibilities or no pain or no fears, but the kind that comes from no longer being at war with yourself. The kind of freedom where you can walk into a room and not perform, where you can look in the mirror and not flinch, where you can let someone love you and not immediately wonder if you're worthy. It's subtle, and it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in moments. Saying no without guilt, crying without shame, resting without apology. It comes when you can feel a difficult emotion and not push it away, when you can sit in the discomfort without numbing out, when you can say, "This is me, all of me, and I'm not running anymore." That kind of inner freedom, it changes everything. You stop chasing validation because you know your worth. You stop shrinking because you know your truth. You stop people-pleasing because you've finally pleased the one person who matters most, yourself. And here's the irony. The more I've chosen myself, the more open I've become. Not closed off or selfish like I once feared, but genuinely open. Because I'm no longer offering myself from a place of lack. I'm offering from fullness, from alignment, from love that includes me. It's not a perfect process. I still fall into old patterns. I still get scared. I still have days when I want to hide. But now I don't shame myself for that. I just come back to the breath, to the silence, to the version of me that no longer needs to earn belonging. That's what this whole thing has been about. Not fixing, not becoming someone else, but remembering who I was before the world convinced me I had to be more palatable, more polished, more anything. Just me. In my wholeness, in my flaws, in my light and in my shadow. And if I could offer you anything, anything at all, it would be this. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to feel deeply. You're allowed to choose yourself, not just in crisis, but in everyday moments. You're allowed to stop running, to stop apologizing, to stop dimming your light for someone else's comfort. You were never too much. You were just trying to survive in a world that taught you to be less. But now you know better. And you get to choose differently. You get to come home to the version of you that never needed fixing, only remembering.